this class we will discuss the recognition of assets in the balance sheet by looking both at the cost model and at the revaluation model. Let's see this example. A company purchases an equipment paying 5,000 euros for this equipment. It is purchased the 1st of January 2014 and the equipment is expected to be used for the next 5 years. What happens to the recognition in the balance sheet? Either the company is using a cost model or a revaluation model, the initial measurement is the same. So the initial measurement corresponds to 5,000 euros, which is the purchasing price. Then we have a problem to recognition of the value of the equipment to the year subsequent to the initial one. Let's see what happens if a cost model is adopted. So this is the case with the cost model. The starting point is represented by the identification of the acquisition cost. The acquisition cost, as you see from the example, is 5,000 euros and the value is of course the same over the 5 years. So the acquisition cost wouldn't change and we have 5,000 euros for all of the 5 years. The company, if you remember, should calculate the depreciation, so the annual loss of value. The depreciation, if you remember the formula, is calculated as the ratio between the cost, which is 5,000 euros, and the useful life, that is represented by 5 years. So the annual depreciation is equal to 1,000 euros. So we can identify the depreciation of 1,000 euros that enters, if you remember, the income statement, and the value is the same for all of the 5 years. Then, in order to calculate the value to recognize within the balance sheet, we need to identify the cumulated depreciation. The cumulated depreciation is simply the sum of the depreciations of each year. So we will have 1,000 euros, which is the depreciation of the first year. Then the depreciation of 2015 will be 1,000 euros of 2014 plus the depreciation of 2015. So we will have 2,000 euros. Then in 2016 we will have the cumulated depreciation plus the depreciation of the year. So we will have 3,000 euros. And the same is going to be applied for the remaining years, arriving in 2018 with 5,000 euros of overall depreciation. At this moment, we can finally calculate the value of the equipment which is recognized in the balance sheet. So the equipment intended as value that is recognized within the balance sheet is calculated as the difference between the cost and the cumulated depreciation. So we will have 4,000 euros, 3,000 euros, 2,000 euros, 1,000 euros, and finally we will have 0. Pay attention that the balance sheet in this case is provided at the end of each year. That's the reason why we have also the recognition of the depreciation in 2014. Now, let's see what happens if instead we decide to adopt the revaluation model. The revaluation model is different because the revaluation model looks at the fair value in the market. So we need some more data in order to apply this approach. Assuming, for example, that the fair value at the end of 2016 equals 3,900 euros. So what happens to our balance sheet? What we need to do is to recognize, first of all, the value of the equipment that should be recognized in the balance sheet, where this value, if you remember, is exactly 3,900, which is the fair value. If we look at this by considering the overall balance sheet, this would be easier because we have, first of all, the value of the equipment. What's the value of the equipment? We need to start from the book value, and at the beginning of 2016, the book value, if we look at here, is 3,000 euros. Now, the difference between 3,900, which is the fair value, and the book value is equal to 900 euros, which means that the revaluation of the equipment is equal to 900 euros. This 900 is recognized within the revaluation reserve. The revaluation reserve represents a component of the shareholders' equity, and we will have a value of 900 euros, which represents the difference between the fair value and the book value. Now remember that still we need to calculate the depreciation. The depreciation in this case is calculated as the ratio between the fair value, which is 3,900, and the remaining years of the useful life. We will have 2016, 2017 and 2018. So the remaining years is equal to 3. So this value will be 1,300, which means that we need to deduct 1,300 from the value of the equipment. So we will have the value of the equipment at the end of 2016, so this is the balance sheet at the end of 2016, of 2,600. So that's very different, because if we look, we have 2,600 by using the revaluation approach, we have 2,000 euros by using the cost model, meaning that we have taken into account the fair value. We can have something more, assuming that we are moving to 2017. So at the end of 2017, the value of the equipment, the market value of the equipment, is 1,100 euros. And this value is unrecoverable, meaning that, for example, a new technology has been launched in the market and the value of the equipment cannot be recovered anymore. So this will be 1,100 that cannot be recovered. In this case, the so-called impairment test should be recognized in the balance sheet by the company. What should be done? First of all, we need to address within the balance sheet the new value. So we can calculate again the difference between the fair value, which is 1,100, with respect to the book value, which is 2,600. So the loss of value will be of 1,500. Again, as a difference between fair value and book value. In the moment in which we have this loss of value, we need to recognize this loss of value also by looking at the revaluation reserve. We do not have 1,500 euros in the revaluation reserve, which means that we deduct only 900 euros. So the revaluation reserve will have a value equal to 0. We are missing 600 euros. These 600 euros that are missing will enter the income statement. That's the reason why I'm writing them here, because they do not enter exactly into these reports. So these 600 euros are an expense that is recognized in the income statement. Finally, what we need to do is again to calculate another time the depreciation. So the depreciation in this case will be the new value, so 1,100 euros divided by the useful life, which is 2017 and 2018, so divided by the remaining 2 years. We will have a depreciation of 550. So minus 550, and we will have the final value of the equipment, in this case in the year 2017, equals to 550. In this case, we have applied what is defined as impairment test. The impairment test is applied both in the case of the revaluation model, but also if a cost model is adopted in the moment in which the loss of value is unrecoverable.